Welcome. This is the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin, Texas, and my name is Luther Elmore. These Public Affairs Forums are held every Sunday, except for the months of July and August, here at our church location, 4700 Grover in North Central Austin. We've been holding these Public Affairs Forums since 1954, when the church was first incorporated. The purpose of these forums is to further the mission of the church, that is, to nourish souls, transform lives, and do justice. So we try to construct our panels in order to do that. If you would like information about the panel and our future forums, then we'd invite you to go to our church website, austinuu.org. Today, our discussion is how to keep from becoming that against which I rage. The interpersonal, intrapersonal part of ongoing activism. Moderating this panel will be Lisa Rogers. Ms. Rogers describes herself as a long-time Lone Star lesbian folk singing social worker. She's been busy. She has been a chaplain at ASH, worked at Out Youth, and is now teaching social work at Texas State University. We're glad to have her with us today, and Lisa will introduce the other members of the panel.
Thank you, Luther, and thank you, Donna, for making this happen. It's true, I am a folk singing social work professor, and sadly I don't get to do both of those at the same time very often. But I have had the privilege of playing here many, many times over the last 3 or 4 decades, and so it feels like home to me, so thank you for welcoming me back to wear this hat. I ran for president against George Bush in 2004 on the Let's Put a Folk Singer in the White House party, which has been inactive for a number of years but is threatening to be resurrected. So watch this space. If you're like me, and I know I am, you have lately felt a wide range of emotions. I know I go from white-hot rage at the senseless cruelty and violence and corruption that we witness to being deeply moved and humbled by the passion and compassion and courage that is all around us and in evidence here today. So sometimes I get so emotionally exhausted I feel immobilized with despair. Fortunately, I've lived long enough to remember that the antidote for that is to let myself be deeply moved and lifted up by my tribe into action. Naomi Klein says, remember to make sure that our work flows from protecting and building that which we love, rather than from rage against that which we fight. Womensmarch.com, and if you don't know about them and you were a part of the march, you should probably sign up for them. They are doing 10 actions in 100 days. So every 10 days there's another action. And the action right now is reflection. Reflection is resistance, they say, which is one reason these forums are so important. So if you're like me, and I know you are, you have a stack of things to reflect upon beside your bed. And I brought some samples from mine, which we can look at when we're done. Women's March also talks about the importance of intersectionality of issues. Women, prisoners, LGBTQ folk, immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, the environment itself are all under the umbrella of social justice. And I would add that we should include the intersectionality of actions, marching, lobbying, showing up, music, art, drama, phone calls, making pussy hats, all are ways to bend the arc and need to be included under that umbrella. Broderick Greer says, one of the traps of this time is feeling guilty when experiencing joy or pleasure of any kind. But he says joy and pleasure too are resistance. Rabbi Tarfon, let me quote another guy from 2 millennia ago, 1900 years ago, he said, it is not up to you to complete the task. Nevertheless, you are not free to desist from it. But I would add, you are free to enjoy it. And in fact, if you're not, we're probably not doing it right. So you're free to enjoy it, I think, by finding your passion and your tribe and letting them lift you up. So it is with much joy and pleasure that I have the privilege of introducing you to three inspiring change agents, at least one of whom I expect you already know. Elizabeth Juarez is a member of Feminicidios in Mexico, a group working on femicide and gender violence in Mexico. Again, you probably remember hearing about a lot of femicide in Mexico a number of years ago, but we haven't heard much lately. But she's working with a group to lift up those voices through social media. And I hope she'll also talk about an art project that's happening to educate the U.S. public on femicide in Juarez and mass deportation in Mexico. Disappearance. What did I say?
Deportation.
Desaparecidos, disappearances in Mexico. With, Ordenada por Presos Políticos de Mexico. She campaigns in favor of Mexican political prisoners and works with immigrant groups in Texas, California, and Illinois to provide Know Your Rights training. David Topping is a Texas field manager for Human Rights Campaign, organizing against anti-LGBT legislation, which includes more than just the bathroom bill, but hopefully he is helping to make sure that we're all free to pee, you and me. He's been an LGBTQ legislative campaigner in Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Arizona, and he saved the best for last here in Texas. But I need to remind him that 25 years ago, Molly Ivins said, all anyone needs to enjoy the state legislature is a strong stomach and a complete insensitivity to the needs of the people. As long as you don't actually think about what that particular body should be doing and what it is actually doing to the quality of life in Texas, then it's all marvelous fun. So David obviously has a strong stomach. You probably know this longtime shero of mine, Peggy Morton, retired journalist and ESL teacher who works with the Social Action Committee here and with Inside Amigos, connecting UUs who want to volunteer to stand with Austin area immigrants. She's a leader with Texas United for Families, tough, and with Texas Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Ministry and the Austin Sanctuary Network, which I think she will tell us about an exciting event on Friday. One of the things I most enjoy about her is that she never met a social justice cause she didn't like. So one at a time, if you would tell us about your work in social justice, challenges, successes, what sustains you, and what you tell yourself to keep going. Okay. And then at least one action item that the folks can do.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Hola again. I started my work talking about gender violence that currently causes 7 women to die every day in Mexico, and was also aiding the mothers of missing girls. This work was very rewarding, talking about sustaining yourself from what you do, but it was also overwhelming as we constantly had to face the stress of the possibility of death of the missing ones. We also faced threats to the relatives and the indifference of the authorities. What a challenge. As time went by, our work was replicated by many individuals and organizations who started to share the pictures of the missing women and girls we were looking for on social networks. It became a solidarity network that aided us to make our common work viral, and we were able to reunite some girls with their families. To me, the fact that our work was replicated has been one of our main accomplishments, to the point that now there are dozens of pages in Mexico that share the cases and data of missing people. Our co-nationals understood the value of our work and spontaneously wanted to join it. I still keep the messages we received on how we inspired them. In Mexico right now, there's 27,000 reported cases of missing people. that only represents 20% of all the missing people in Mexico. The rest haven't reported because they're scared to go missing too. Another success case happened when we were able to gather support to put pressure on Javier Duarte, the former governor of Veracruz, Mexico, one of the states who has more missing people. He was confronted in public by the mother of a missing girl and decided to make fun of her demands in a viral video. Those are the kind of officers that we have in Mexico. They are the norm. Unfortunately, they're not the exception. We gathered the signature of at least 15 groups in the US and Mexico, and after a couple of weeks, the governor apologized to the mother and for the first time agreed to meet her and other families who were seeking their missing ones. After our work was replicated to the point that the amount of cases we were receiving was going down because of the unprecedented good competition, I must say, I decided to become more active in preventing people, and especially women, from going missing and murdered. Then I started with my colleagues, Jornada por Presos Políticos. This group was a perfect fit for the kind of activism I wanted to do. This is a group that supports political prisoners that belong to an indigenous system of justice in southwest Mexico, close to Acapulco, if you want a reference. These indigenous groups promote gender equality, and they have elected many women as their security force leaders. One of the main motivations they have to stay organized is to stop drug cartels in their hometowns, who have been killing women and kidnapping them to turn them into sex trafficking slaves. That's what is happening with missing women in Mexico. These communities have been neglected by the authorities who protect drug cartels and now have incarcerated some of their leaders by arguing they are not real security forces, even when their state laws allow indigenous people to form their own governments and practice self-defense as a community police. For the first time in years, the incarcerated leaders were given a voice outside the country and have a better chance to change the official rhetoric. In Jornada por Presos, we have renounced to the savior complex by stepping aside and we have given the political prisoners the chance to tell their own stories. That's a main principle for activism. It's not about you, it's about them. I still get emotional, sorry. We have acted as media for them. It is wonderful what an engaging article on social networks can do for them. We now have hundreds of people sharing and understanding their stories for the first time. The battle for their freedom is hard, but we are confident the Mexican government will be ultimately forced to release them for lack of evidence. Our fight for the freedom of Gonzalo Molina, Arturo Campos, and Samuel Ramirez, all of them indigenous people, is a fight that concerns people in the US as Washington runs a drug war that has increased the number of users from 20 to 26 million since it started. So it's not working. The funds the US government sends to Mexico are being used to repress the indigenous communities that want to fight the drug cartels, believe it or not. They want to fight them all, not just a few, as the Mexican government has done. The drugs trafficked from the region, these social fighters have tried to protect, flow all the way to Chicago, and are creating a crisis of women in the US addicted to hard drugs as heroin in this country. Now the Mexican government wants to destroy the law that allows indigenous communities from fighting back cartels. So we are launching an invitation to support the law that protects them, Law 701. So I have some handouts if some of you want to add your name or your group to join this effort to protect the indigenous people in Mexico that are doing the job that Washington and Mexico, the Mexican government, aren't doing well. So these are some tips of advice that I want to share on how to do your work as social activists. You have to be creative. You have to say your message in as many different ways as you can, with as many different people, and manners and media that you can get. For example, $10 go a long way in a good social media post in Facebook. Okay, that's why I say that sometimes we put $10 to a post, and hundreds of people come and share it, just with $10 and a good title and good information. Isn't that amazing? If an issue bothers you enough to say, someone needs to do something about this, which is why we're living in the Trump era. Everybody is upset about something, right? Well, then you all have to adopt that cause. And don't be shy to reach out to organizers online or locally, so that you can be an agent of change. Thank you.
I'm David Topping. I work for the Human Rights Campaign and the Texas field manager here. And I have had the privilege and the fortune to work across the country on LGBTQ rights. I'm originally from Michigan and have worked there quite a bit, but over the past 3 to 4 years, I've been in 6 different states working on issues of non-discrimination. One of the most frustrating things about this movement has been that last year when we had the great fortune to get marriage equality, a lot of folks said, all right, done, everything's over. When the fact of the matter is, there is so much more work to be done. In over 25 states across the country, you can be fired from your job, denied housing, or refused access to public space just because you're gay or transgender. And the LGBTQ community faces a significant amount of discrimination, the transgender community in particular, in public life. And that has manifested in state legislatures taking action against us across the country. Last year, over 200 bills were introduced in state legislatures that explicitly attack LGBTQ people in various different states across the country, most in the South and some back west. This year, we're currently at 119 bills across the country that explicitly attack LGBTQ people. And those bills kind of fall in a couple different buckets. So the first is specifically anti-transgender bills. And those are things like SB 6, the bathroom bill here. Those bills that make it so that transgender people can't use a bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. And when you think about that, those are some of the most insidious bills, because if you cannot safely use the bathroom when you're out in public, you can't live in public life. You can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't go to the grocery store, because if you have to use the bathroom and you are not sure which one you can use because of the law, you can't do it. And so these bills really are not about bathrooms or peeing or anything of that sort. They are about transgender people existing in public life. And those bills have been introduced all across the country. The second bucket is religious refusal bills. So these are bills, and we have plenty of them right here in Texas, that make it so that folks can use their religious beliefs as a license to discriminate. What's being used a lot here in Texas right now is actually a bill called HB 3859, which is a very jargony way of pointing out a bill that uses religion to discriminate in foster care. Now, as we all know, Texas has a lot of work to do when it comes to the foster care system. There are major reforms needed. And right now, the Texas legislature is messing around a bit by including this bill that would make it so that foster care agencies, if they have a sincerely held religious belief, can refuse service to anyone. And this bill is clearly designed to make it so that they can refuse to allow LGBTQ couples to adopt or foster children. But when you think about it, these bills are a broad bill. So you could go to a Catholic foster agency, and they can refuse to allow someone to adopt or foster a child because of their marital status, because of that person's religion, because anything that they want, as long as they say it violates their sincerely held religious belief. There are also bills that are called local preemption bills, and those are bills that make it so that folks can't pass local non-discrimination ordinances or invalidate local ordinances that have already been passed. So here in Texas, Dallas, Plano, Austin, and San Antonio have passed local protections for LGBTQ people in employment, housing, and public accommodations. SB 6, as it is right now, would invalidate all those protections and make it so that no city could pass local protections as well. And then the last bucket, and these are starting to pop up in Tennessee, are bills, and not just Tennessee, but kind of across the country, are bills that make it so that they weaken marriage equality. It's making it so that government documents don't reflect a same-sex couple. So a government document would have to say man and wife instead of saying individual one, individual two, or partner and partner. And when we look at these bills, when we look across the country, there is an assault on LGBTQ people, particularly on transgender people. And I think I know we're supposed to talk about like the ways that we sustain ourselves. And for me, going across the country, it's recognizing that the fight is the same everywhere, that we are all in this together, and that we have a community that's working on this. I have had the great fortune to know so many people working at so many different organizations across the country that are doing really good work, whether they are local organizers who spend their free time knocking on doors or talking to voters, or they're folks who work at national organizations who cover multiple states and are tireless in their efforts to push back against this legislation. We really are fighting for our lives when it comes down to it, when it comes down to LGBTQ legislation. And we're really excited because we get to work in partnership with wonderful organizations. I'm here on the ground for the Human Rights Campaign, but we work very closely with Equality Texas, the Texas Freedom Network, the ACLU of Texas, and the Transgender Education Network of Texas. All the work that we're doing right now as we're pushing back in the ledge is about that. And I think, you mentioned the quote earlier about needing a strong stomach to deal with the legislature, and it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, you sit in those hearings. I don't know how many of you were able to watch the SB 6 hearings as they were happening about a week and a half ago. They're hard. It's really hard to listen to folks have to sit and justify their lives. I am so grateful for those wonderful people. And so I have a few things that you can do in addition to that. So folks should have gotten one of these cards. It says, "Don't discriminate in the Lone Star State." If you fill out the card in the back, up at the top where it says "Dear," leave that blank. Put in your personal reason for opposing anti-LGBTQ legislation. Fill the card out and give it to me after this. We drop these off to legislators and we show the support that's there. When we, the way that we beat these bills back, in Texas, the last time we were in session, we beat every single anti-LGBTQ bill. And we're going to do it again this year.
Yeah.
But the way we do that is by y'all coming out and working and volunteering. So there's filling out the card, that's step one. If you're available tomorrow and you haven't already registered, we have our statewide advocacy day happening in Austin. I know probably some of you are coming because we have close to 1,000 people that are attending tomorrow. If you want to come and you haven't registered, come chat with me afterwards. I can get you set up. We are going to be having a rally on the South Lawn and then doing lobby meetings throughout the day and talking to legislators about why bills like SB 6 and HB 3859 are wrong. And then in addition to that, the last thing that you can do is volunteer with us. So we have 4 staff members on the ground and 4 field offices open throughout the state. We have an office here in Austin, and we want to get folks on the ground working with us, phone banking and volunteering and talking to other voters. A lot of what we do is calling voters in districts, calling voters in districts where we have legislators who are on the fence. Those legislators need to hear from their from their constituents, so we need to make sure that we're calling them and getting them in. Our program has been able to produce over 1,500 calls to legislators in just 2 months, and we need more. So if you're able to help out, if you want to help and continue doing this work, the best way to kind of push back that despair and that thought about what's going on in the world is taking an active moment and taking an active push against it. So, thank you.
Yeah.
As a Unitarian Universalist, my faith is about our faith is about deeds, not creeds. I'm also a retired public school teacher who has continued my service to others as a full-time social justice volunteer. A couple of my favorite UU principles, which I'd like to include, are that we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of everyone, and we also recognize the importance of an ongoing, responsible pursuit of the truth. Both of these principles are lost on your causes, and they're definitely lost on our current U.S. immigration laws. Personally, I am tired of hearing lawmakers vilify hardworking, family-loving immigrants as if they're some kind of boogeyman. That's not who they are. I'm drawn to working in solidarity with our Austin immigrant community. I've taught English as a second language, both at the secondary level in our public schools and also voluntarily with adults in our community. I've also visited immigrant women and their children locked up in for-profit prisons. I've visited women in the nearby all-women's facility in Taylor, Texas, and also the families in the for-profit prison in Karnes City, Texas, down in South Texas. Consequently, I've heard many stories, and I've learned much. My life has been enriched by their culture, even if I am heartbroken by their stories. At the same time, I can be empowered by listening to them stand up for themselves and speak up. So the least I can do with my own white privilege is to speak up also. Basically, these immigrants arrive to our borders and they ask for help. They share their stories of torture, much of it caused by our own failed U.S. military and economic systems. And then we put them in ice boxes, literally, for 3 to 14 days. And after they pass a beginning level of a credible fear exam, we put them in a van. They have no idea where they're going, but they end up incarcerated while they think they believed them and they're finally going to help them. So I want to share one short version of a story that's very personal with this congregation. And that is during the summer of 2015, an immigrant woman, Guatemalan, Zulma Franco, came to our First U congregation and asked us if we would consider allowing her to take sanctuary here. An attorney had failed to file paperwork and she had received deportation orders. Even though she had already spent time in 2 of our prisons, she had paid a $15,000 bond, and she was checking in regularly with Immigration Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. Our congregation learned that she had been an LGBTQ activist in Guatemala, and her life was threatened. If she were deported, we knew she would be murdered. So after 2.5 months of her living in sanctuary here, I like to say I like my church. I wouldn't want to live here 24/7. But after 2.5 months of us learning from her, she led this campaign. We ran a very public campaign for her freedom. And finally, ICE actually gave her a stay of deportation. After another 1.5 years of again checking in regularly, which, in case you don't know, it's quite a fearful thing to even go before ICE, particularly when you're in a vulnerable population. But finally, the government has granted her a U.S. resident card, and she is on the road to full citizenship.
Yeah.
If we hadn't stood up against these unjust laws, she would be a murder victim today. Next, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church of Austin also provided sanctuary to another immigrant friend, a young mom and her son. And these cases have been a catalyst to grow our Austin Sanctuary Network, which now includes 17 congregations and 5 nonprofits. We're still growing and continue to work in solidarity with our immigrant community. Congregations are stepping up where our politicians are failing us. Physical sanctuary is just one of the tactics we use. We also accompany immigrants to court hearings and use our citizenship privilege to show them that they have support. Folks, incarceration and deportation are a failed system. There's some good people involved, but mostly the system is bad and people get sucked into it. We as people are better than that. We need to see immigrants as our neighbors, as our fellow humans who are eager to work and pursue all the good that life has to offer. Yet, our Texas politicians continue to assault the situation, currently with an ugly Senate Bill 4, which is an anti-sanctuary bill. I've testified against the bill both before the Senate State Affairs Committee and just last week before the House State Affairs Committee. The Senate has not only passed the bill in their committee, they've taken it to the full floor, and they are in support of this bill, which, by the way, would give them the opportunity to come and arrest our recently democratically elected Travis County Sheriff. The House Committee hasn't voted yet, but insiders tell me that it's a done deal. They are not just ignoring 1,000 other people like me who are standing up and speaking out against it. They're ignoring police chiefs from all over our state. They're ignoring the experts. Basically, they want our police officers to become a part of a deportation machine when they prefer to be part of community policing and bring in the immigrant community out of the shadows so that they can expose what needs to be resolved. So that brings me to the 2 action steps I would like to suggest. First, I hope tomorrow morning you will pick up your telephone and call your Texas House representative. If you have friends who live in rural, more conservative areas, please get them to get on the phone with their legislators. They need to hear from us. Secondly, I would love for more individuals, more congregations, more nonprofits to join our Austin Sanctuary Network. We are a growing network standing in solidarity with the immigrant community, and we would love to have more support. And we can teach you, or most likely you have skills you are not even aware of that you could come and bring to us. So you can find us on Facebook. Again, it's the Austin Sanctuary Network. Or if you'd like, I'll be here after the service, or after the forum. And you could also email me, though, at insideamigos@austinuu.org. So insideamigos@austinuu.org. Thank you.
Well, I'm inspired. We have time for some questions, comments.
My question is, Peggy, tomorrow when we call our House representative, remind me what bill it is that we're going to speak to them about, the number.
Thank you for asking. It's Senate Bill 4, known as SB 4. And even though the House, that's a Senate bill, but the House is hearing and going through the process of passing that exact bill. So
Senate
SB
Bill
4.
Thank you.
They don't have a House bill equivalent that they're voting on?
They don't. They have some companion bills in there, but this is the way they can fast track it. Even though the committee seemed quite amiable the other day. And
if you can do me a favor when you make that call, and also talk about SB 6, which is the bathroom bill, that's also in the House right now. So.
And I would ask the panel if there have been times or incidents that you could share with us when you have been particularly discouraged or particularly inspired by incidents that you've known, and how you address those situations to continue the good fight.
I want to answer that one because when you have to be in managing a forum where you see all the cases of women dying because of gender violence, you really need to put a shield on every day. And first, I got to the point where I was thinking that it was useless to do that, to be publishing every day 2 or 3 cases. And they were all so gory. The details were terrible because the way that women die, when they die in the hands of drug cartels or their intimate partners, is extremely violent. But then the feminists came to me, the other feminists, and they told me, this is something that needs to be done. There's a value on this. Don't give up, because nobody else has, talking about the stomach, nobody else has the stomach that your group has to do this. And then it was inspiring to see how eventually my colleagues in Mexico took the streets, and they created hashtags saying, femicide, national emergency. Wow. And then you know what happened next? People were talking about femicides in Argentina, in Colombia. I think That is the legacy of the femicide movement in Mexico, in Juarez. And I dream that one day we're also going to be talking about the 3 women in the US that die in the hands of their intimate partners. Nobody's talking about them. So that's how I sustain myself, by thinking about what may happen next.
Also, you talked about that it's inspiring to be able to give women the voice, or the opportunity to find their voice, and that is something that...
Yes, that has been beautiful, because we have magnified also the voices of the community leaders, of the mothers that otherwise had no experience on how to do activism. We had so many people, women showing up to a group and saying, I need help, I don't know what to do. And it's really hard when they have no previous experience, and then out of need, they have to become activists. So it's nice when you can hold their hand, and like I said, you can leave the savior complex aside and tell them, okay, tell your story, we're going to publish it. And that was also very, very nice to do.
Yeah.
I'd like to share too, because it can be extremely hard work, particularly when I'm visiting the women who are incarcerated. Obviously, sometimes it's great because we celebrate someone earning their way out and getting political asylum. But one of the last friends who I visited, and I just visit as a friend, letting people know that there are people out here who do not like our U.S. laws. But I visited a friend for 15 months while she was incarcerated in Taylor, Texas. And for the last 3 months, her appeals case was going to come up, and they kept rescheduling. And by the 3rd time, she's like, you know, my papa is 90 years old. I'm just going to let them deport me. I'm not waiting around for this anymore. That was heartbreaking to me. But where I find my inspiration is after a situation, well, partly I have to be with that and just acknowledge it, because that's important. It's not like we can just not like I can just brush it aside. But that's when I get involved with, I have immigrant friends in the community. That's where I met Elizabeth. I mean, the Austin Ayotzi group had invited me to the consulate to protest out in front, and I met Elizabeth there. I know other women in town who clean houses. We trust them with their keys, you know, these big houses, and they're busy cleaning houses, they're raising families, and they are the real rock stars. That when they stand up, they speak out. That's what gets me moving. That if they can stand up with everything they're facing, that I can definitely get out there too.
And so I think for me, it's looking at the thing that makes me the most kind of in despair and kind of feeling like most frustrated is when I see the way that the assault on LGBTQ folk is kind of raised, and it's pushing past just legislation and just getting more into physical violence. I mean, like for many years, transgender women of color are at the margins and are the folks who are most in danger. Just this year alone, 7 transgender women of color have been murdered, and that's the kind of thing that our transgender folks are facing. And the culture that pushes that is the kind of legislation like SB 6, right? The reason people feel justified in doing that is because our state legislatures don't see transgender folks as human. And then in addition to that, LGBT community centers across the country have been being vandalized, have had people kick their windows in. An organization I worked with in Florida, Quality Florida, their Orlando office had rocks thrown through the window the day after the inauguration this year. And when I see the kind of physical violence that this community is in danger of, and that my community is in danger of, that terrifies me. But when I see folks pulling together, and when I see people across the country working, I mean, I've worked mainly in rural areas. This is the first time I'm actually working in a city, which is great. But when I see folks in rural communities who are organizing around LGBTQ issues and who are taking this step forward in spite of all the danger, in spite of the fact that it's putting a target on their back, that's inspiring to me. when I see folks doing that, like that is what makes my heart full and what makes me able to do this work.
I'm Carolyn Grimminger, and I wanted to ask you, do you have a monitoring system within yourself, like when you're starting to get kind of burnout, then what do you do specifically for self-care so that you don't get fried? Because we need you, please. Thank you.
So, I mean, I'm probably the worst person at self-care because I work all the time and I really like what I do, so I want to work all the time. But I think it's about having those personal check-ins for me with friends and knowing that the folks that I'm working with are in this fight with me, and having those momentary check-ins and taking a step back when needed. I mean, I was at the SB6 State Affairs hearing a couple weeks ago, and it was a marathon hearing, and there are times when the things that were being said and the questions that folks are being asked were really just kind of like draining on me, and so I took a walk around the Capitol, wouldn't listen to it for a little bit, and kind of pulled out for a moment. But I think for me, a lot of the work that I do, and I think a lot of the folks here, it's all consuming, right? Like your life is about this work, and this is what you're doing all the time. And so self-care for me it looks more like those quick 15-minute check-ins with a friend, or taking a short break of like an hour. But other than that, like I'm there at all times.
Working out is very important.
Okay.
And like David said, having my friends, having my husband to just take a break and have downtime. Getting on a bicycle, fresh air, going faster than I can go in the Capitol. Smart idea. Oh, that's true. We do have that open air rotunda
That's
in the
right.
Capitol.
And you can go down the stairs.
Yes. And there's a woman, Erin Walters, who is grew up in this church, and she's studying to be a minister, and she started up a group called the Spontaneous Singers. And so they'll get into that open air rotunda, and she'll just start a couple of songs, and everybody joins in. In fact, she did it in the line for SB4 on Wednesday, and she led 2 songs, and the immigrant community had arrived, and then this man started leading a chant, and she's like, I've done all I need to do. She went to the back of the place, and it was just wonderful because we were rocking that place.
How do you do it, Elizabeth? What do you tell
Yeah.
yourself?
I take timeouts when I need to, and sometimes they can last 1 or 2 weeks, but
Good.
then I try to take my mind somewhere else, but I think the people that are in activism were addicted to politics, so it's hard even then to not be watching the news. But yeah, I just turn off social networks and I don't answer the phone, and then when I know for sure that I have recharged my soul, then I come back with a different perspective, because it can be very tiring.
What do you see as the focus for young people and their future activism, and what are their concerns and then their contributions?
I'll talk about a young group called Youth Rise Texas, which it's made up of teens. Some of them might be 20 or so that are starting college, but they're all children of people who've been either incarcerated, not children, have had family members who've either been incarcerated or deported. And I would say young people could really team up with them. Just hearing those activists, they are learning to be activists, and they lead us in chants, and it is wonderful to be around young people. But what's nice about this group is they are learning they carried great shame, to have a family member. I mean, we demonize this stuff. And I think like a couple of people have said, we forget that they're human. But the teens are another group that they're good. They are amazing writers and singers and dancers. And that is a group you can find through grassrootsleadership.org. Actually, it's youthrisetexas.org has its own website.
I want to say that's why we use a lot social networks, because they're there, the youth are there, and I always try to make the cases, especially the ones of the missing girls, human. We talk about what they like, we put their pictures there, and that's when the youth can relate to the cases and say, wow, this could be me, and especially because now a lot of people in Mexico are praying to girls online to turn them into sex trafficking victims. So we tell them what to look out for. And we also tell their parents, and that's when a lot of them, go to the forum and they say, wow, this girl is just my age, this girl lives in my neighborhood. I'm scared, but I'm more aware now. So that's how always, when you talk about a case, try to make the victim or the issue as human as possible. It's not only about facts and numbers.
I think for me, as someone who got their start in this work when I was 15, it's about letting folks take the lead and letting young folks take the lead on it and being there as the person to catch them if they fall, right? At the end of the day, it's about letting them take the lead and be the organizers of their own actions and being there to support and assist when folks need it.
There were a lot of young people at the Capitol till 3 a.m. that night,
yeah.
weren't there?
Yeah.
It was very inspiring.
The majority of the folks who were staying the entire time were a bunch of young college students.
And it was the documented, the dreamers who showed up on Wednesday in force, on their spring break. Testifying, leading chants.
Yeah.
In summation, I'd ask for each of you to give a brief summary and tell us what we ought to take away from your presentation today.
One thing, forgive yourself if you can't get involved in every single issue out there, but just take one issue and run with it.
I think the one thing would be to take action in whatever small way that you can. If it's signing a postcard, if it's making a phone call, if it's showing up for a rally, if it's showing up to talk to your legislator, take action in one small way every single day.
Yeah. Well, I want people to think about how the refugee and immigration crisis in this country is a direct effect of the policies that Washington has written. And like I explained in my presentation, they're not always coherent when they apply those policies in Mexico. So can you please explain these to the people that want to badmouth immigrants from these rural communities that come here, and explain them that they are running away from this violence that could cost them their life, and it has costed them their livelihood. Most people have been displaced because of this. That's what I would like you to take into account.
I was going to add, my takeaway would be, I would urge you to reflect, resist, gather in community to nourish souls, transform lives, and do justice, but I would add with some joy and pleasure in there.
Hi, I'm Sam John Duckworth. My wife Barbara Duckworth passed away recently, but she was very much an activist in programs, and I would encourage you guys to look at the demonstrations in Washington during the Vietnam War. I think you'll find that 1969. They keep saying 1,000 souls. You go into Washington Monument to the White House where we were reading the names of the fallen Americans. That, guys, is millions of people. No violence at that particular time, though Tom Hanks and the other guys in the media tend to make movies out of it. It might change it a little bit. But my encouragement to you is, if there is a united effort.
Thank you.
I'm just curious if you are connected with people who are not standing with you and how you deal with that. I know I have a former FBI agent uncle with whom I disagree on absolutely everything. And I'm guessing just about everybody has a relative like that. We are in Texas. I would love to hear what y'all say, and what y'all personally do. Thank you.
I can start. So a lot of the work that we do around LGBTQ legislation and anti-LGBTQ legislation has to be bipartisan, because the places that we do it are mostly Republican-run states. And so I am constantly working with Republicans on like on the other side of the aisle, and I can tell you there are some times when we may be united on like non-discrimination, but on every other issue we are not there. And you know, it's about trying to find common ground. When it's folks who are completely against you, it's just saying, all right, thank you, and trying to move away from that conversation.
I just watched a program on PBS. I thought that it was so helpful by a linguist that was talking exactly about this question. And what he said is that when you find someone that doesn't share your views, especially the people that have been indoctrinated into the strict parent philosophy, that means that people have to take care of themselves, not have the state take care of themselves or the community. Then what you have to do is talk to them about the things that they have done in their life to take care of others. And then the more you talk to them about what they've done in their life to take care of others, that part of their brain is gonna get activated because it's dormant right now.
Wow.
And then you have to keep repeating the word care in all your actions. We do this because we care about the LGBTQI. We do this because we care for immigrants. We do this because we care for women's lives. We do this because we care to stop the drug war in Mexico. We care, we care, we care. And then you talk to them about like, we care the same, as much as you care. We care. And that's how you're going to get through that wall that they have built around them.
I like it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like
We have a question
Not my
here.
words, but I thought that they were awesome.
What motivated all of you to get involved in social work? You've answered a lot of questions about this, but what really focused you to get into social work?
Personally, I just can't imagine not being focused on it. I mean, I taught journalism and English as a second language and stories, people, lives. That moves me. I just can't imagine not doing it. So
I mean, for me, it's about my life. I am queer, and when folks are talking about this kind of legislation, it's about my life and it's about my friends and my community. You know, I have a lot of transgender folks who are in my life and who are very close friends of mine and family, basically. And you know, this is about my life and my people, and so there's no way I couldn't.
Well, I guess for me it was about the unhappiness that the things that were happening in my country, you know, gave to me. And I guess it's also about missing the old Mexico that I grew up in, you know, and now you see how it has changed. And most of the people that are living here, we want to go back. But if we want to go back, we need to become active in changing what's happening there. And, you know, when you understand that most of the policies that are affecting Latin America, you know, and creating this mess, well, not only in Latin America, in the world, you know, are being written in DC, you know, you think, wow, we have a really good, a really important task to do here, you know. So it was, I think it was about the love for the people, you know, and like I got tired of being unhappy. And then I decided that I wanted to do something with that unhappiness and frustration and take it into action. That was my way to deal with it, I guess.
Yesterday I received a letter from Senator Cruz. And, yes. And it was encouraging me to join him in trying to defund Planned Parenthood. And I was not surprised that he wanted that, but it was filled with, there were several inaccuracies. For one thing, he talked about taxpayer-supported abortions. That is not true. That hasn't been true since 1980. And then he mentioned in one place he talked about Planned Parenthood killing 300,000 unborn babies each year, and in another place, killing 1 million unborn babies each year. Now, it's Perhaps it's a philosophical point whether a 14-week-old fetus is the same as an unborn baby. I don't believe that it is, but I respect that belief. But he is misrepresenting the work of Planned Parenthood. It's, I mean, talk about fake news, it's libelous, it seems to me, because it absolutely is with malice. What do I do with this?
So how do you handle that misinformation that is out there about many of the things that all of you are involved in?
So, I mean, from the perspective of someone who works within legislative stuff, I mean, one, call his office every day and annoy them. Here's the thing, when we talk about calling your senator, and we know that it's probably not going to change on that, but you know what you can do? You can make his staff's life difficult, and you can make them want to focus on something else instead. So calling into his office and having your friends call in. The second piece is advocating for Planned Parenthood.
Oh,
Because, I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, and at the end of the day, they have their talking points, we have our message, right? They're not going to deviate from that, and you're not going to make him stop talking about taxpayer-funded abortion, even though that's not what happens at all. But what you can do is you call the office, you show up when they have town halls, you have meetings with the staff, and you make sure they know that you're there. You bring people with you. I think that the Indivisible guide that's gone around the past couple of months is fantastic, and I think that I'm so glad that people are finally hearing, oh, I need to call my senator. Yes, call your senator, because at the end of the day, the folks who move policy in DC and in Austin are the staff members. They're the folks who work for those legislators. Those are the people that move policy and make things happen. And when you make their lives hard all day, when you make them have to answer a phone call all day, they're going to notice that. And you're going to be able to move things at least a little bit. Maybe it's that, instead of focusing on that, they focus somewhere else. But, you make the calls.
And I think in gathering in community, being a part of Indivisible and the strength in numbers and we're stronger together and that sort of thing, and it takes a village. I also would love to see, speaking of young people, more creative energy around things like ACT UP and Lavender Menace and Billionaires for Bush and things that people can have fun making a statement around. So I'm looking forward to more of that.
I'd like to thank the panel for their work and for being with us today, giving up their time and energy, and for all the energy and dedication they give to these causes. So onward, activists. Thank you very much.